8 hours to go before Casablanca's 1942 debut, Warner Brothers scrambled to remove a sequence. A guy pleading for his life to evade the Nazis was seen on film alongside Rick Blaine's most ruthless and profit-driven behavior. However, this scenario was not the only one that vanished. Hollywood concealed these illegal moments from Casablanca for decades, including hazardous drinks and covert transactions. In 1938, an American instructor called Murray Burnett is at the center of Casablanca's tale. While Austria was under Nazi rule, he and his wife traveled there to assist Jewish relatives in withdrawing funds. A nightclub they discovered in a little French village later made a lasting effect on Burnett. A black pianist entertained a diverse crowd of clubgoers, including immigrants, Nazis, and Frenchmen, with jazz. He couldn't shake that scene. Upon his return to the United States, Burnett formed a partnership with writer Joan Allison. Everybody Comes to Rick's was a play they composed in the summer of 1940. A cafe was the setting for the entire narrative. A lawyer who had abandoned his family, Rick Blaine wasn't the enigmatic figure we know from the film. The play's Ilsa, Lois Meredith, was also significantly different from the film's Ilsa. The former was more outspoken and flirtatious. Broadway producers were uninterested in the play despite its powerful anti-Nazi message. One explanation was the widespread concern that Lois may have slept with Rick in order to conceal crucial letters of passage. It was fate that the play didn't make it past Warner Brothers, who went on to produce a groundbreaking film based on the script. In an odd turn of events, Warner Brothers received the script for Everybody Comes to Rick's the day following the December 1941 assault on Pearl Harbor. In the opinion of studio story editor Irene Diamond, it had all the makings of a fantastic film. Calling it sophisticated hokum, she confided in producer Hal B. Wallace, who saw an opportunity to create a picture that would resonate with the audience, who were suddenly fixated on the war. Warner Brothers paid $20,000 to acquire the play. At the time, no one had ever paid that much for an unproduced play screenplay, much less one written by two unknown authors. Many in the entertainment industry questioned the decision's merits after hearing about it. The time, nevertheless, was just right. The chance to create a picture that mattered presented itself to Warner Brothers, which was recognized for producing socially significant films when the United States entered the war. Warner Brothers saw the film as merely another appointment on an already full calendar, therefore they weren't expecting much from it, despite investing much in the screenplay. Actor Humphrey Bogart, who portrayed Rick, shared this view. The picture was just one of 4 that Bogart produced in 1942, and he didn't give it much of a shot. The actress Ingrid Bergman, who played Ilsa, took the position solely because she was turned down for a part in another film she was interested in. The script for Casablanca was incomplete when filming began on May 25, 1942. Just the prologue was complete. Hurriedly, writers scurried. Only 3 days before filming was to begin, Julius and Philip Epstein had completed their draft, but Howard Koch was yet to complete his. The 2 weeks of filming were filled with late-night scene writing and early morning rushes to the set. As a result of the mayhem, producer Hal B. Wallace insisted that the screenplay be condensed in August since it had expanded to 126 pages. There was a 7-hour rewrite of the scene where Ilsa and Rick meet in the cafe. Some of the finest lines in the picture, such as "Here's looking at you, kid," weren't even in the original screenplay, but the anarchy ultimately produced brilliance. That one was concocted by Humphrey Bogart during filming. It wasn't until after filming had ended that Wallace had the brilliant idea for the iconic last phrase, which he subsequently paid Bogart $50,000, a lot in those days, to record. Everyone was bewildered by the script's incessant alterations. When Ingrid Bergman approached director Michael Curtis for direction, he would just shrug and say, "I don't know, we'll see." The finale wasn't even established when they shot the airport scene. Bergman often found herself unsure of how to perform in each scene. It remained a mystery whether Ilsa would go accompanied by Rick or Victor Laszlo. In one conclusion, she remains with Rick. In another, she travels with Laszlo. And in a third, Rick's death occurs. Just before the film's November 1942 debut, the crew voted on the finale. It wasn't just the main characters that were perplexed. Dr. Z. After uncomfortably wriggling his eyes, Sakal, who portrayed Carl the waiter, joked that he wasn't sure if he was a spy or a clumsy waiter. Most notably, Bergman was irritated. She was confused about whether her character would pick Rick or Laszlo as her suitor. Even more stressful was the advice from the writers to play it in the background. At the last minute, she and Paul Henreid, Laszlo, switched up the scenario from a love scene to one in which she and Bogart argue. In the heat of moment, her emotions had to switch gears. The unpredictability was evident in her outfits as well. She had a gorgeous fur coat ready for the airport scene if Ilsa stayed with Rick, and a basic travel suit for when she went with Laszlo. She quipped that she worried more about the coat than the screenplay, because she didn't know which one to wear until the day of filming. Bogart was skeptical as well. At 42 years old, he doubted he was attractive enough to play the role of romantic lead. He informed producer Hal Wallace, "I am not knowledgeable about this love stuff," and left it at that. The fact that Bogart was more famous for playing criminals than lovers likely added to his anxiety. He drank excessively to calm himself during the first week of filming, which caused Curtis to halt work for 2 days. Bogart's stature posed still another challenge. He had to sit on cushions or wear platform shoes in several shots since he was shorter than Bergman, 5'8". While he was being really serious at one point, the entire crew couldn't help but bust out laughing because he stumbled over his platform shoes. Misunderstandings caused by director Michael Curtis's heavy Hungarian accent only served to heighten the mayhem. When someone delivered him a dog on set, instead of the poodle he had requested, he became quite angry and shouted, "Not a dog, a poodle!" When he said puddle, he was referring to a rain scenario. In another instance, he instructed Bogart to make love to her with your hat on. The audience was perplexed until he clarified, "You know, like an American." In another scenario, he yelled out, "Bring in the extra people," and requested more extras. When he said he was looking for background performers, no one understood. Things took a dramatic turn after that. The term Casablanca became ubiquitous in November 1942, when the Allied forces invaded French North Africa. In order to capitalize on the buzz, Warner Brothers hurried to conclude filming. Production on the film, which began in May 1942, was remarkably completed in August after only 71 days. A few smart ploys emerged from the haste. The closing sequence, which features an iconic airport, was actually shot on a miniature soundstage rather than a genuine airport. In order to make the wooden model of the plane appear larger, the crew even recruited little individuals to act as extras. They concealed the set pieces with thick fog, which created an iconically gloomy sight. But the production crew wasn't having all the luck in the world. The head of Hollywood's production code, Joseph Breen, was very rigid when it came to film morality. On December 3, 1941, he submitted a note to Warner Brothers outlining 13 points he wanted altered about Casablanca, expressing his deep dissatisfaction with the film. The presence of profanity or explicit sexual material really irritated him. Among his initial requests was the elimination of any indication that Rick's Cafe had a brothel on the upper floor. "What the fuck are you doing here?" was another sentence that he wanted changed for Rick. The question, "What on earth are you doing here?" The term broad was removed from the script because Breen thought it objectionable. That wasn't the end of it. Small details were Breen's forte. For instance, in one scene, Captain Renault straightens his tie shortly before meeting with a female visa application. Renault had originally said, "Send her in and turn on the light in my bedroom." Breen had them reword it to simply, "Send her in." He even had issues with Ingrid Bergman's costumes. He made sure her dresses revealed less cleavage, adamant that women should always wear full body coverings. The original story's sexual connotations were eliminated by all these alterations. Also changed was the dynamic between Rick and Ilsa when they were in Paris. One scene even depicted them in bed together, so it was obvious they had an affair in the original screenplay. Breen deemed this intolerable and directed the removal of any mention of an extramarital affair. There should be no indication of familiarity between Ilsa and Rick, according to Breen's second note of January 6, 1942. Consequently, the emphasis in the flashback sequences was shifted to the use of hints and subtle cues. As an illustration, Rick's statement, "I remember every detail, the Germans wore gray, you wore blue," evolved into a hidden allusion to their former love affair. A feeling of anxiety and yearning intensified the story's emotional effect as the performers were compelled to convey their emotions through looks, tone, and subtext as a consequence of these alterations. Although sexual footage was eliminated due to censorship, their chemistry actually became stronger. The character of Captain Renault was likewise altered. In the beginning, he was visibly corrupt and took advantage of women who were eager for an exit visa in exchange for sexual favors. The line, "We have everything here, from wines to exit visas," said by Renault in a cut scene to a young woman, hints to his true goal. Breen denounced the idea that he coerced women into such settings in a memo, expressing his disapproval of the scenario. Because of this, the screenplay underwent significant revisions. For example, the line in which Renault stated, "If there are any attractive women, send them to my office," was entirely cut. Additionally, Casablanca's dialogue underwent extensive revisions to conform to Breen's rigid standards. Take Rick's iconic phrase, "Here's looking at you, kid," as an example. It was nearly altered to, "Here's good luck to you, kid," due to the word damn being banned, but ultimately, the original line was chosen. The line, "You're becoming a very poor bartender," replaced the word lousy in the previous line, "You're becoming a lousy bartender." Sam's remark, "Boss, ain't you going to bed?" also underwent revisions. "Boss, aren't you going home?" is the revised version, so as not to imply anything sexual. Although the filmmakers were irritated by these changes, they did have an interesting side effect. The limitations made the authors and performers depend more on subtlety and implication, which added dimension to the film. These changes, however, were not exhaustive. Unexpectedly, director Michael Curtis chose to remove a crucial sequence from Casablanca just 2 days prior to the release. In this scene, Humphrey Bogart's Rick Blaine pays a visit to Paul Henreid's Victor Laszlo in prison. The scene had cost $8,000 to film and lasted more than 2 minutes, so it wasn't a little choice. In the moment, Rick goes into Laszlo's cell, which is dark. Rick, who usually wears a dapper white jacket, is hiding his identity in this black suit. Rick presents Laszlo with an invaluable gift, the letters of transit, that might pave the way for Laszlo's eventual escape. The issue is that Rick wants 100,000 francs for them, which is a huge sum that is over $2 million today. Rick tells Laszlo angrily, "There are 2 types of people in this world, those who stick their necks out and those who profit from it," in response to Laszlo's question about his doing this. "I've had my neck out there. Now I'm in the profit-taking business." This quotation exemplifies Rick's bitterness and cynicism. The sequence was ultimately cut from the finished film. The sequence was deleted for a number of reasons. The film was already somewhat lengthy, but the company wanted to cut it down so that additional screenings could be scheduled daily. Crucially, test viewers felt that Rick came out as too avaricious and cold-hearted during the jail scene. The filmmakers obviously intended for us to be in suspense regarding Rick's motivations and emotions right up until the credits rolled, but this moment gave away too much. Even producer Hal B. Wallace said in a memo that the sequence tips our hand, implying that it prematurely revealed too much about Rick. The finale was more impactful since the sequence was cut, which left Rick's motives a mystery. Another issue was the Hays Code's stringent regulations, which forbade depictions of corrupt government officials or police personnel in motion pictures. It may have been implied in this scenario that the cops were up to no good since Rick could visit Laszlo in prison and make an offer. The directors also avoided potential censorship issues by removing the sequence. On top of that, another scene was cut from the final cut. The video depicted bartender Sam deceiving a German officer with a very potent beverage. The event took place in 1941 at Rick's Cafe, when the officer proudly ordered a beverage while claiming he could handle anything. Sam created a lethal concoction known as the kamikaze cocktail by combining extremely potent rum with absinthe and, dare I say it, gunpowder. Rick, who remained silent but appeared to give his approval, caught Sam's eye. The cop downed the entire thing in one sitting. His expression went from proud to embarrassed before he slid his eyes back, altered his expression, and landed loudly on the bar face first. In the cafe, everyone froze and looked. Rick remained distant, flashed a little grin, and then reverted to his composed self. As if nothing had happened, Sam cleaned the bar area surrounding the unconscious cop. Even the waiter, Carl, cracked a joke saying, "I think the gentleman has found his water in a glass." The sequence was funny, but the producers opted to cut it because it would have made the film even longer and delayed the entrance of Ilsa, a crucial character. The idea of explosives in a drink was seen too risky by some, and censorship was another issue. Films of the period were not allowed to depict excessive drinking or mock military leaders. Concerned that the sequence would incite unrest in neutral nations, the studio decided against airing it. Curiously, Humphrey Bogart favored keeping the sequence in the film because he thought it added dimension to Rick's character by gently demonstrating his sympathy for resistance movements. But his thoughts weren't sufficient to salvage it. Warner Brothers didn't release Casablanca early on November 26, 1942, in New York City, because they believed it was a fantastic picture. They did it to cash in on a big global event. Operation Torch, an Allied invasion of French North Africa that included Casablanca, had commenced just a few weeks earlier on November 8, 1942. The studio recognized an opportunity to capitalize on the sudden national interest in that city. The Hollywood Theater on 51st Street hosted the premiere, and the price of admission, $2.20, was rather high for that era. Interestingly, none of the movie's stars were there. Ingrid Bergman was engrossed in a Broadway production of The Three Sisters, while Humphrey Bogart remained in California due to his fear of flying. Rather, the event drew officials from Warner Brothers and New York socialites who helped get the picture some buzz, though it didn't exactly make a big sensation. In the weeks following, on December 14, 1942, FDR viewed Casablanca from the White House. This happened right before he was supposed to meet Winston Churchill for a war meeting in Casablanca, the real city. Seeing the French national hymn La Marseillaise sung so powerfully in the film really affected Roosevelt. He reportedly broke down in tears at this sight. While Roosevelt and Churchill were meeting at the Casablanca Conference on January 23, 1943, the picture was released to the wider public. The release was deliberately scheduled by Warner Brothers to ensure that the picture remained relevant to current events. Despite the ingenious advertising, the film failed to become an immediate smash, earning only $3.7 million during its initial run. For Whom the Bell Tolls, the highest-grossing film of 1943, brought in $11 million. By the end of the year, Casablanca had raked in $7 million. The intended budget for Casablanca was $950,000, but it ended up costing $1,390,000. An additional $100,000 was needed to film the now iconic La Marseillaise sequence, which contributed to the overall rise. Nevertheless, its publication was hindered by the conflict. Due to fuel restrictions and blackout regulations, many theaters had to cut back on their hours, making it difficult for people to get to the movies. Another factor that limited the movie's worldwide distribution was the export restrictions imposed by the Office of War Information on American films. The picture was well received by reviewers during its initial release, but many failed to see its timeless quality. The themes of love, sacrifice, and resistance to oppression struck a chord, and Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman's performances were highly acclaimed. The New York Times praised the film, writing that it made the spine tingle and the heart leap and was thrilling. With 8 nominations, Casablanca stunned everyone in 1944. Even though it was widely considered to be merely another war drama, it went on to win several major awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actor for Humphrey Bogart. It was unexpected for Bogart to be nominated for a love part because he was better known for playing strong people. Claude Rains's performance was so outstanding that he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, even though he hardly appeared on screen for 25 minutes. Oscars for Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Adapted Screenplay were bestowed to Casablanca on March 2, 1944. Given the screenplay's disorganized state, the last scene wasn't even completed until the day before production, leaving Ingrid Bergman uncertain of the story's conclusion. Its victory is all the more remarkable. Michael Curtiz, the film's director, ultimately won after 4 nominations, demonstrating that his leadership and vision were crucial to the film's success. The 1952 German edition of Casablanca had significant changes following War II. The initial 102-minute running duration was reduced to 82 minutes by approximately 20 minutes. The tale was drastically altered, and the Nazis were completely eradicated as a result of these revisions. There was a drastic alteration to the original film that eliminated a memorable sequence involving Victor Laszlo and the Rick's Cafe patrons playing La Marseillaise over a Nazi officer's music. Despite being a crucial representation of the film's anti-Nazi stance, this almost 4-minute scene was considered too delicate for German audiences during its initial run. Conrad Veidt's Nazi villain Major Heinrich Strom was cut out completely. His portions were trimmed and the language was changed to clarify his absence, even though he only featured for around 18 minutes in the original picture. For instance, instead of Strausser, the storyline now involves the government showing interest in Victor Laszlo, albeit they don't specify how. The German version removed a crucial component of Rick's character development, the final airport scene where he confronts and kills Strausser, in favor of a less dramatic battle that suggested Rick and Ilsa just parted ways. To prevent controversy and make the film acceptable to post-war German viewers, Warner Brothers themselves made these adjustments, rather than German censors. Frame after frame, the swastikas on the armbands of the German commanders were covered up or erased. Not only were generic military motions used in place of Nazi salutes, but posters and banners that bore Nazi emblems were either changed or taken down. Words like "them" or "the authorities" were used in place of any mention of the Nazis, Germany, or the war, leading to weird contradictions in a storyline that was difficult to follow because the protagonists were terrified of nothing in particular. The German version of the film rewrote the whole historical backdrop and setting, shifting it from 1941, during World War II, to an unspecified era in the present day, completely omitting any reference to the war or the Nazis. The histories of the characters were likewise impacted by these revisions. The original film's protagonist, Victor Laszlo, played the role of Victor Larsen, a Norwegian atomic physicist and survivor of a concentration camp. This alternate timeline, Laszlo was evading Interpol after escaping jail for reasons related to his scientific study. He was not fighting the Nazis. Scenes were reworked to incorporate discussion of fictional scientific concepts called delta rays, rather than actual resistance actions in order to conform to this new narrative. Additionally, Ilsa's history underwent a transformation. Her spouse had transitioned from a valiant resistance commander to a scientist beset by personal demons. They changed her reasons for breaking up with Rick, taking out the part about the Nazi invasion of France. Also changed was Rick Blaine's background. He had a history of fighting for causes, as seen in the original, as a gunrunner for Ethiopia, and as a soldier in the Spanish Civil War. These subtleties were omitted in the German translation, reducing him to a straightforward American expat patriot devoid of any discernible political background. Though it was still famous, his statement, "I stick my neck out for nobody," now denotes scientific espionage instead of political opposition. His iconic comment about being astonished to see gambling going on lost all its political overtones, and even Captain Renault, who had been shown as a corrupt official of Vichy France, became simply another generic police officer without any affiliations. Audiences in Germany, who had only seen the 1952 version of Casablanca, were blown away when the uncensored version eventually broadcast on television in 1975. When word got out that the film was based on a genuine event and dealt with Nazi Germany's atrocities head-on, many were outraged. In Germany, this release ignited discussions over censorship, history, and the significance of facing painful historical realities. Airing a colorized Casablanca on TNT in 1988 caused Ted Turner a great deal of criticism. The picture, which was a masterwork in black and white originally, was meticulously colored using state-of-the-art technology. The 67 colorists working for Turner put in almost 4,000 hours and $450,000 on it, using a computer system that added thousands of hues of color, including the deep brown of Rick's bar and the precise tint of Ingrid Bergman's eyes. They paid close attention to every detail. Critics and moviegoers were outraged by the adjustments, which were made to make the picture more acceptable to younger audiences. Additionally, Turner went ahead and issued a colorized VHS version for $89.98. The colorful packaging prominently displayed the words, "Now in color." There were rumors circulating that Turner had destroyed the original negatives, but this was not the case. Still, the fear that the original black and white version would be lost was a major factor in the outcry. Even the colorized version has several dubious decisions. The original film's gloomy and murky atmosphere was lightened, ruining the mood in numerous moments, and Rick's traditional white jacket was replaced to a bizarre powder blue. It got much worse when, in the middle of a scene, Ilsa's outfit changed from green to blue. Since the reviewers and fans believed that the colorization compromised the film's core, these changes simply served to infuriate them. Colorized Casablanca had a very unfavorable reception. One of the saddest days in film history, according to Roger Ebert, who also famously compared it to painting a mustache on the Mona Lisa, was the critical reception of the day. Protesters outside theaters carried placards saying, "Keep your crayons off Casablanca," and "Ted Turner, enemy of cinema." And the broadcast's dismal ratings were just the beginning of the criticism that eventually reached Congress in 1989. Several film groups, such as the Directors Guild and the American Film Institute, denounced colorization, and Woody Allen vehemently opposed it, describing it as cultural butchery. The matter was heard in the United States House of Representatives. Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola were among a number of filmmakers who went so far as to pay for full-page newspaper advertising against colorization, calling it cultural vandalism. With an open letter that read, "If you don't like old movies, don't buy them, but don't ruin them for everyone else." Humphrey Bogart's son, Stephen Bogart, entered the fray and criticized Turner. The outcry was so great that Turner discreetly ceased colorizing films by 1990. Some copies of the colorized Casablanca VHS, which was quickly removed off shelves, are now fetching hundreds of dollars at auction. The colored version has long since faded from memory, never having been distributed on home media formats like DVD or Blu-ray.